my first combat mission is a little foggy because I hadn't been shot at before, and I didn't know what it was going to be like. So I had apprehensions, but it was something I was looking forward to, and I guess I was like all young fighter pilots, hoping I'd see German airplanes so I could shoot one down. You know, we were, I guess, brainwashed in our training that there were none better than we were. And I particularly wanted to put my training to the test. And I wanted to tangle with the famed 109 because the Merchant Smith was, I don't know, I guess it got the most publicity. I heard about the 109 more frequently than I did 190. And the guys very seldom talked about the German jets. I think toward the middle of March, you know, somebody came back off a mission and said they saw a German jet that day. And they were always fascinated with the speed. He said, boy, they're like a bullet, you know. And all I could imagine was some guy going by me at the speed of sound. But we were up there escorting bombers. And my first mission, I was number 4 Charlie, tail end Charlie. I think Benny Kimbrough was my element leader. He was number 3. And he just said, stick with me, and if we get into a fight, your job is to keep Germans off of my tail. I get to shoot the guy down. What? I don't get to shoot him down, you know, but the wingman's job was to protect. But we went up there, and as we passed into Germany, this puffs of smoke in the sky, that's the flak. And they said, if you see it, it's okay because it's already burst. The flak that you don't see is what you have to worry about. You won't see it until it's too late. And so I guess when the bombers made their run over the target and we set out, the bombers go over the target and we set out here to the side and picked them up on the other side, brought them home. We didn't see any enemy aircraft. It was kind of a milk run. Nice, easy mission. It was about 5 hours, 5.5 hours. I didn't see anything. As a matter of fact, I didn't see anything for the first 2 or 3 missions. All we saw enemy aircraft off to the distance, or unidentified aircraft. They probably were enemy aircraft. I think on my 4th mission, we did a strafing mission, and you know, we got to go out and shoot our guns. We were attacking some trains, and I couldn't get the engine to blow up. It was getting frustrating because I was hitting it and it wouldn't blow up. But I think about the fourth or fifth train that we hit, I finally got to see poof and a big cloud of smoke. You know, it makes you feel good when you know you hit your target.
So, do you have any descriptions that did you engage enemy fighter pilots at any point? Can you describe that for me?
I had one engagement. We spotted some German planes below us, and Rip Harder was my flight leader that day. And I didn't wait for him to say, let's go get him. I went after him. And I swooped down and up behind this guy, and I was pretty close to him. I pulled the trigger, and all the time Rip is telling me to get my ass back in formation. So I don't know if I hit him or not. I think I hit him, but I couldn't prove it. I didn't see him go down. That was my only real counter. I think 4 or 5 missions later, we had some jets that were attacking the bombers. And when I got to shoot at the jet, he was going pretty fast as he was on his way down toward the bomber formation. And I just peeled over and went after him. I fired too far out, and I could see my tracers were behind him. So he was pulling away. By the time I had corrected my lead, it was too late. I think only fired about 2 or 3 second bursts.
Did you lose any of your friends over there, Bill?
Oh yeah, I lost William P. Armstrong. We used to call him Pinckney. The day that he got shot down, he was wearing my A2 jacket, and I didn't take my Lucky Charms. I always carried $3 silver in my pocket, and so I lost $3 that day in losing him. Sam Lieutenant, who was a classmate, was lost on a mission, and Maurice Gant. So those 3 guys that went overseas with me that were lost.
Did that change your feeling of invincibility when some of your friends started going down?
No, not really, because Pinckney, he was hit by flak. His plane just blew up. I don't think he ever knew what hit him. Morris Gant, we didn't see, no one saw him disappear. Sam Lieutenant was hit by flak. So out of the 3, none of them were hit by enemy planes. None of them were result of enemy aircraft encounter.
Where were the missions that you flew out of Italy? Where did your missions wind up? Where did you fly to?
We went to Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, Austria, Germany.
Hang on a second. We were so rudely interrupted.
Yeah, I think my bigger shock was when flak hit one of my roommates, my tent mates, Frank Wright. It just blew his plane out. Again, it's like they always said, the flak that you see is already too late. You may want to change your direction or your altitude, because if you stay in that same place in the same direction, they can track you. So if the smoke puffs here, you want to get here or here, you don't want to be here, because if they think they're at the right altitude, they'll just move over. The fellow that brought me into his tent, Hugh White, I was with him when he got shot down, because he bailed out, and we saw him get on the ground and run into the woods, and we got back and reported it.
You know what happened to him?
Yeah, he came back at the end of the war. He had an interesting story to tell, because the Russians were catching up to the German troops who were holding him, and they surrendered to him rather than let the Germans capture him. I mean, the Russians captured them.
So, how many missions did you fly in total?
19. You see, we were so good that when Hitler found out we were there, he decided it was time to quit.
What was it like when you heard that the war had been declared over?
Well, Clarence and I had both had, on a motorcycle, we'd had an accident. I missed the last 2 weeks of the war while I was healing up. So, I probably would have flown another 5 to 7 missions. But I couldn't sit down. And I had been up to Bologna. I knew the end was coming, because when I ran into the German soldiers in Bologna, they didn't seem at all aggressive. They saluted and kept going. But the war ended in May, and I said, oh boy, we'll be home pretty soon. But for whatever reason, they sent the white fellows home, but we just stayed there and stayed there. We moved from Catalica to Lucera, where we hung out till October. And I thought when we came home, it was, by the time we came home, the war in the Pacific had ended. There's no more war. Well, what are we going to do?
What was it like when you came back to the United States?
Well, I think it's my first disappointment with my country, because we got off the ship in New York and realized that we were back in the USA. Signs, white and colored, and places we couldn't go. And I said, damn, this is what we've been fighting for. People's freedom, but not our own. we got 30 days of leave from the 20th of October to the 20th of November. And while we were home on leave, we got a telegram. I got a telegram saying that my leave had been extended for 2 more weeks, so I could stay home for Thanksgiving. And then the Monday after Thanksgiving, I got another telegram. Stay home for 3 more weeks, stay home for Christmas. So then in early December, they said don't report back until the 3rd of January. So we had 75 days of leave. I thought, that'll catch up with me. But when I got back to the replacement depot in New Jersey at Camp Kilmer, they said, oh, that's all for the convenience of the government. And I wasn't charged any leave time. So that that made it all worth it.
So,
and then they didn't know what to do with us. January 1946, they told us, you can get out. Well, I hadn't made any plans, so I decided stick around, see what's going to happen. So they had one unit at Lockbourne, which is where Ben Davis was, and Tuskegee, where they were training. So I thought it'd be kind of nice to be an instructor. So they sent me to Tuskegee. And I got there, and they didn't need any instructors. And by this time, they're phasing out the white instructors. There were still some supervisors there. But most of the instructors were now black. They're all combat returnees. So I was just sitting around waiting my turn. And I got a class, 46B, and I became an instrument instructor. So I got to fly in the front seat and the student flew in the back seat.
how long did you stay in the military?
Well, I stayed at Tuskegee. I was the last one at Tuskegee. Closed on the 20th of August, 1946. Then I went to Lockbourne. And there were so many black pilots at Lockbourne that we had about twice as many, 3 times as many pilots as we needed. So I got there in August, and in early September, they said, anybody want to get out can get out. So I started school at Ohio State. I taking a night class, and applying to colleges. I applied to MIT and Notre Dame and University of Missouri, and all of them turned me down. I never knew why. Or MIT said I didn't meet their criteria for admission. Notre Dame they told me to wait till September. No, to apply again for September. And the University of Missouri told me they didn't take Negro colored students.
Wow.
So I think I was in St. Louis I went to St. Louis for Thanksgiving. And while I was there, my brother came home. He'd been in the Navy. And he said, why didn't I go to St. Louis University? So I went down he was going to get some of his transcripts, because he was trying to get in medical school. And by this time he was married and his wife was at Tennessee State. So he was going there. So I talked to one of the priests at St. Louis University, and they said, hey, you're welcome here. And so he gave me an application. In January, I started at St. Louis University.
What did you wind up with your degree in?
I have a degree from Maryland in business and UW, University of Washington, in history. Took me 17 colleges and all those years. I retired before I got my degree.
Well, that sounds just about like my career. Well, Bill, you just surprised me by telling me that you flew you were in both Korea and Vietnam. Tell me about how that happened.
Well, let me back up a bit. You know, I got out in January 1947, went to school for a year. Ben Davis, who was the commander up at Lockbourne, invited me to come back on active duty. And he explained to me that he wanted me to be part of the integration program that the Air Force was opening up, that the 332nd would be no more, and that we were going out to the Air Force. And so I agreed to come back on active duty. Before I went on active duty, we had the Berlin airlift, and I was a reservist out of Scott Air Force Base. And I took 30 days of active duty to train for the Berlin airlift and got over there. Then I got recalled to active duty while I was on the Berlin airlift. Went back to Lockbourne, flew there for about a month and a half, from August to actually 2 months, November. And then I was assigned to Keesler Air Force Base, Biloxi, Mississippi. So that was the spreading out of all these fighter pilots for the Air Force. My tour there was up in the spring of 1950. I had enrolled at University of California and got out. By the time I got to California, I had a telegram. The Korean War had started, and I was to report back for duty. They decided to let my wife have her baby before they called me to duty. And after that, I went back on active duty. I was originally assigned to SAC, but I didn't like SAC. SAC didn't give me much respect. And a friend of mine was a person, Paulus Taylor, was the personnel officer for the 1704th Military Air Transport Squadron. they needed an operations officer and asked me if I wanted the job, and I interviewed for it. Colonel Richardson liked the way I interviewed, took me on as his operations officer, and I was a match pilot. For the Korean War, my boss, our boss at Scott, decided he would send people to Korea on TDY because we weren't needed in the war zone itself. We'd go to Tachikawa in Japan for 30 days TDY at a time, and we'd fly back and forth into Korea carrying personnel and supplies in and bringing out the wounded. I did that twice in 1951. So I had two 30-day TDYs. Never spent a night in Korea, but I went there many times. I thought because of my 4-engine time that I had gained while I was in SAC and MATS, that I could probably get a job with the airlines. So I left the Air Force in November of 1953. The Korean War was, I don't know if it was quite over yet, but it was winding down. And found out my skin was still too dark. So by January, my money was running out, I was getting hungry. And I had become a helicopter pilot on my last tour in the Air Force. And the Army needed helicopter pilots. So in 1954, I signed up for 3 years with the Army as a helicopter pilot. And during that tour, I didn't like the Army. I thought the Army was still very much segregated.
What was the difference between the Air Force and the Army in that respect?
The Air Force was much more progressive. The Air Force had a system that they said would and could work, and the Army didn't believe that. The Army was still socially and business duty-wise on the disagreeable side of segregation. I remember we had a unit party when I was at Fort Sill, and I danced with the colonel's wife. And this captain got up, because he didn't last in the Army much longer. He said, took his wife and said, "I'm not staying here and watch that nigger dance with a white lady." And he walked out. Whatever happened to Bill Black, I don't know. But someone told me that they kicked him out of the Army, which they should have. I did 3 years. I did, after that, 57, I left the Army, got a job crop dusting in Central America. I did that for about 2 months, came home for Christmas leave. A friend of mine invited me up to Vancouver, British Columbia. I went up there for New Year's party, and the airline offered me a job. But we hadn't settled on salary. They only wanted to offer me $600 a month plus my miles, I didn't think that was enough, so I turned them down. And in late January, they called me, and they doubled the base pay, and it got a little better. So I moved to Canada in '57, or early '58, and I stayed there until 1965. I'm a major in the reserves, and I got recalled to active duty. Specifically, I was a safety officer and a check pilot, and the Army was short of us, or short of my specialty. So they called me back to active duty. I went down to Fort Hood, Texas, activated the 268th Aviation Battalion, was their CO until we got to Vietnam. The guy came in, a West Pointer, needed command time, and they made him the CO, but because I outranked him, they had to get rid of me. So they sent me down. General Williams didn't send me. General Williams said, good, I got a job for you in Saigon. So I went to Saigon and was the head of safety and standards for 1st Aviation Brigade.
What was it like? What did you think of Saigon?
Oh, heck, it was. I was in a war zone, but not in a war zone. Business was usual in Saigon. I'd have lunch at the embassy every day. We ate at the finest restaurants at night, most nights.
Great.
So, my 13 months in combat were interesting. And, I made lieutenant colonel. So I thought my last 5 years were good. And as a result, I was able to retire at the age of 48 with 30 years of service, because I got a full credit for my reserve time because I could count my civilian flying. I got a drill for every 2 hours I flew. I'm flying about 80 hours a month. So I'm getting only 30 days in the month, but I'm getting 40 days of credit. So they didn't know what to do with me when I retired. So they just gave me 75%.
Wow, what a story. What a great life. What a great adventure you've had.
Yeah, I think what I'm doing now, I'm doing more for people, because I'm telling the world of the hardships that I had to endure with discrimination and segregation, and how far our country has come. In all these years, we've been making giant strides to improve our democracy. And I think the guys that were here with me this week, they all played a role in that. Leo Gray, George Hardy, Roy Richardson, those guys, they all contribute to the goodwill of our democratic society. And that's what I get a kick out of doing that.
Absolutely.
I go home tomorrow, do a program in Seattle. Tuesday, I fly down to Ontario, California, to do a program there on Wednesday. Fly back to Seattle to do a program on Thursday in Bellevue. Friday, fly down to Las Vegas to do a weekend program at Nellis Air Force Base. Monday, meeting in Los Angeles. By the Tuesday, the 18th, 19th, I get to relax.
Well, Bill, thank you so much.
You're welcome.